My dear students. Once again, I'm Sean Xavier Alcalita, so I'll be going to tackle about on the first part of St. Thomas Aquinas' view about the natural law. So since he's the main proponent in philosophy, is the main proponent of the natural law theory. So let's take a closer look. So before we proceed, so please don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, so let's go first with Saint Thomas Aquinas. So, who is Saint Thomas Aquinas? So, he's an Italian Dominican friar, a Catholic priest, an immensely influential philosopher, theologian, and a jurist in the tradition of scholasticism. He is also known as the angelic doctor because of his intelligence was likened to that of an angel, and also a doctor communis. Foremost, a classical proponent of natural theology, he is known as the father of Thomism. He is also a saint. That is why 25 years after his death, he was proclaimed saint by Pope John the 22nd. Okay, and he is also a model teacher. He's also a professor of theology and philosophy in his own time, and also a doctor of the church. So in this case, that he is the Catholic Church greatest theologian and philosopher. That's why the our faith, our teachings of the Roman Catholic Church was based on the philosophy of Saint Thomas Aquinas. So, who is Saint Thomas Aquinas? So, he was born in Roccasecca in Italy. He was the son of a duke in a certain castle, and he was the youngest of eight siblings. And and from the age of 3 years old, he started to question about the idea of God, and because of that, his parents was able to send him to school, and because of his superior intellect, that's why he's called the Doctor Angelicus, no? Because of his superior intellect, the teachers in his own time could not handle his intelligence, and that is why he was promoted to a higher grade. And during his high school days, in his teenage days, he was bullied by his classmates as the dumb ox, no? And later on, at the age of 16, he found his vocation in life to become a priest, despite of many oppositions from um, his family members. And because of that, to cut the story short, he became a priest under the Dominican friars, no, Dominican religious congregation from the order of preachers, and he started to write anything. And one of the first writings that he did was the De Divinis Nominibus, or the divine names. And moreover, he wrote 88 books, ranging from the commentaries of all the books of Aristotle, all the books of Aristotle's being, he made a commentary on that, and all the books in the Holy Scriptures, he made a running commentary, and he called it the Catena Aurea, so the chain. And he wrote various books on ranging on theology, ranging on philosophy. Moreover, also wrote prayers, no, and likely one of the magnum opus, or there of all the 88 books, there are two magnum greatest, two of them are the greatest works. The first one is the Summa Contra Gentiles, and that is the book that is intended for those who are against the Catholic faith, no? So those people who are trying to question the Catholic faith. And the last one is the Summa Theologiae, or Summa Theologica, and that book was intended for the seminary students who are studying theology, no? And that book was remained um, unfinished because he died at the age of 49 years old in the year 1274. And from there, um, 25 years after his death, he was proclaimed saint by Pope John the 22nd. So from there, we have to proceed further. So, okay. So this is the tomb of Saint Thomas Aquinas today. So his bones were placed under the altar of a church in one of the churches in Italy. Okay, so let's okay, so Saint Thomas Aquinas was no dummy. Remember him, the Italian fella, the Christian monk, the philosophical superstar of the 13th century. Saint Thomas Aquinas thought morality was important for everyone, and that being a good person was a vital part of God's plan for each one of us. But he knew that not everyone had been exposed to the Bible or had even heard of God. So what bothered him was how could people follow God's moral rules, also known as the divine commands, if they didn't even know about the guy who made the commandments? St. Thomas Aquinas couldn't believe that God would have expectations for us if he didn't also give us, all of us, a way to meet them. So, Aquinas theorized that God made us preloaded with the tools we need to know what's good. This idea became known as the natural law theory. And there are a lot of versions for this theory still circulating around today. But St. Thomas Aquinas' original take on the natural law is by far the most influential and the longest standing. How influential? Well, if you're a Catholic or a member of any of the major Protestant denominations or were raised in any of those traditions, then you're probably already familiar with how St. Thomas Aquinas saw that the moral universe and your place in it. Basically, God is awesome and He made you so you are awesome. It's just important that you don't forget to be awesome. So in the natural law theory, you can note you can notice this the two um, the comparison between the natural law and the man's law. So the natural law is based upon the principles and truth that is inherent to creation, that is already preloaded within the creation. Man's law is based on the dogmatic beliefs. It is the constructs of the mind. And by the natural law, it is harmonized with, which is due to knowledge and understanding. For man's law, it's complied with due to the fear of punishment. Natural law is universal. It exists and applies anywhere in the universe regardless of the location. But in the man's law, um, differs with location based on the whim of the legislators, or that is a moral relativism, or it is based on the culture. Okay? Another thing here is that it is eternal and immutable. It cannot be changed. It exists and applies for as long as the universe exists and cannot be changed. And for man's law, it changes with time based on the whims of the legislators, or it changes with time in accordance with the needs of the time. Okay, so eternal law is the highest kind of law. St. Thomas Aquinas says that it is the eternal plan of order in the mind of God for the whole universe. and further that this plan is in a certain way in the creatures that God creates, so that they have an inclination or tendency to their own proper acts and ends, according to where they fit in this vast and beautiful divine plan. This eternal law, this plan of God, is imprinted in rational creatures, like human beings, in a special way. And St. Thomas Aquinas calls this the natural law. He says that the natural law is the rational creature's participation in God's eternal law. What does that mean? We are capable of understanding the world around us, grasping with our minds what is good for us to do, and moving ourselves to do it according to this rational desire, which we call our will. That means that we have a higher participation in God's providential plan other creatures do, because we can understand it and become willing agents in bringing to it to completion for ourselves, for others, and for our communities. These actions are natural to these kinds of things. Human beings are like these things in a certain way. We are creatures with material bodies. So, like other animals, we have an inclination to remain in being, to see food and self preservation, to reproduce, and to raise an offspring. And yet, unlike these creatures, we are endowed with the power of reason, which means that we're not simply moved by a brute force or instinct. We have something higher, a spiritual soul, which gives us the nature of the spiritual dimension. Now, on this point, there is often a very deep misunderstanding our spiritual nature. It's a basis for ability to understand and to make free choices. It gives us a higher perspective on our lower or bodily inclinations and desires. So we all want stuff. St. Thomas Aquinas got that, and he said that it was okay. In fact, the theory of natural law is based on the idea that God wants us to want things, specifically good things. St. Thomas Aquinas argued that God created the world according to natural laws, predictable, goal driven systems whereby life is sustained and everything functions smoothly. And as part of this natural order, God made certain things that were good for his various creatures. Sunlight and water are good for plants, meat is good for cats, and plants are good for bunnies. And because God is awesome and he instilled all of his creatures with an intuitive desire for the things that he desired to be best for them. So the things that were designed to seek known as the basic goods. Actually, there are seven of them. The first thing that all living things just naturally want, St. Thomas Aquinas said, is self-preservation, the drive to sustain life. St. Thomas Aquinas thought that God built all his creatures with a survival instinct, and this appears to be pretty much true. I mean, we naturally avoid dangerous situations like swimming with the hungry sharks, and we find ourselves in danger. We don't have to stop and ponder the options before getting ourselves to safety. After preserving our own lives, the next most pressing basic good is to make more life, in other words, to reproduce. Some beings are able to do this on their own, so that's what we call it asexual, no? But since we need to coordinate matters with a partner, God kindly instilled us with a sex drive and made the process feel good to make sure that we do it. But once we manage to achieve our second basic good, which is the reproduction, we need to educate those kids we just made. For humans, that's going to mean stuff like school and lessons in morality, but even non-human animals need to teach their babies how to hunt and avoid predators. Otherwise, the offspring that they work so hard to create are not going to survive long enough to reproduce themselves, which of course is the goal of everything. And while these first three goods seem to apply to a pretty wide swath of creation, including man, including humans, animals, and plants, some of the basic goods are just exclusively for humans because of the particular kind of being we are. For instance, St. Thomas Aquinas thought that we are built with an instinctive desire to know God. He believed that we seek Him in our lives, whether we've been exposed to the idea of God or not. Interestingly, the existentialist John Paul Sartre agreed with Aquinas on this, that he said, we're all born with a God-shaped hole inside of us. The tragedy for Sartre is that he was an atheist, so he believed this was an emptiness that could never be filled. So, taking the next page out of Aristotle's book, St. Thomas Aquinas also said that humans are naturally social animals, so it's part of our basic good to live in a community with others. While short periods of solitude can be good, he believed that we're basically pack animals, and our desire for the love and acceptance and our susceptibility to peer pressure are all evidence of this. Now, since we naturally want to be part of the pack, it is a good idea not to alienate our packmates. So basically, St. Thomas Aquinas said that we recognize the basic good of not pissing everybody off. I mean, he didn't actually say it that way, but if he did, I'm sure it sounded a better lot in Latin. The point is, St. Thomas Aquinas said that we feel shame and guilt when we do things that cause our group to turn against us. And that was another basic good, which is to avoid offense. And finally, St. Thomas Aquinas said that we're built to shun ignorance. We're natural knowers, we're inquisitive, and we want to be right. This is another trait that we share with the non-human animals, because knowledge promotes survival, and ignorance can mean up starving to death or ending up with someone else's dinner. So these are the seven basic goods, and from them we can derive the natural laws. So St. Thomas Aquinas teaches that God has imprinted in his creatures their inclinations to proper acts and ends in accordance with God's eternal plan. And likewise, he's imprinted these inclinations in human beings in a higher way. We have the inclinations that belong to us in virtue of our spiritual nature. We're now in a better position to understand that St. Thomas Aquinas means by this famous claim that the precepts of the natural law follow the order of our natural inclinations. He means that as we understand the inclinations of our spiritual nature, we come to grasp what God made a human being to be, and what human life is ordered to. And so, we come to know what a human being ought to do and avoid. St. Thomas lists 5 principles of human inclinations. The inclination to the good, that is, to what protects us. The inclination to self-preservation, for example, to seek food, shelter, clothing, to avoid threats to our life. The inclination to sexual union and the upbringing of offspring. The inclination to knowing the truth, and the inclination to living the society, which includes the inclination to friendship and to justice and fairness towards others. Of course, some people might sometimes act contrary to one or another of these inclinations, and there's always the possibility that due to sin, our desires will become distorted. But Aquinas thinks that these 5 inclinations really are features of this kind of beings that we are, and that they give us a fundamental orientation towards that will make us increasingly happy and increasingly free. So we don't need the Bible or religion class or church in order to understand the natural law. So St. Thomas Aquinas said that instead our instinct shows us the basic goods, and reason allows us to derive the natural law from them. Right acts, therefore, are simply those that are in accordance with the natural law. How does this whole system work? Well, I recognize the basic good of life because I value my own life. And that's clear to me because I have a survival instinct that keeps me from doing dangerous, stupid stuff. Then, reason leads me to see what others also have valuable lives. And from there, I see that killing is a violation of a natural law. So, for each negative law or prohibition, there's usually a corresponding positive one, a positive injunction. For example, the basic good is to promote life. So, do not kill is a prohibition, but there's also a positive injunction that encourages us to promote life. I can take that positive injunction of promoting life to mean anything from feeding the hungry, to caring for the sick, to making healthy choices for myself. And we could do the same thing with each of the basic goods. So, the basic good of reproduction leads to a prohibition, don't prevent reproduction, which is why the Catholic Church has been opposed to birth control. And the positive injunction there is, do procreate, do all procreating you want. And if you think it through, using your God-given reason, you'll be able to see how the other natural laws are derived from the basic goods. But of course, as with the divine command theory, the theory of the natural law raises plenty of questions. For example, if God created us to seek the good, and if we're built with the ability to recognize and seek it, then why do people violate the natural law all the time? Like, if this is supposed to be something so intuitively obvious that even plants and non-human animals can manage it, why is the world so full of people killing and offending others and folks who do everything but seek God? So, St. Thomas Aquinas had two answers for this: ignorance and emotion. Sometimes he said, we seek what we think is good, but we're wrong because we were just ignorant. And yes, that happens. I mean, there was one time when cigarettes were literally what the doctor ordered. Back then, we thought we were promoting our health, but we were actually hurting it. So, no matter how awesome God made you or your desires, you have to have some understanding of how to be awesome. And sometimes we see what we should do, but emotion overpowers our reason, and we fail to do the things we know we should. So in those cases, we're just gonna forget to be awesome. Now, as with the divine command theory, natural law gives us a handy answer to the grounding problem. It tells us that morality is grounded in God, and He created the moral order. It also gives us the reason to be moral. Following the natural law makes our lives work better. Today we learn about the natural law theory as proposed by St. Thomas Aquinas. We studied the basic goods and the way instinct and reason come together to point us to the natural law. And we studied the basic natural inclinations which differ us from the animals. So please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube page for more videos. Once again, I'm Sean Xavier Alcalita. Thank you very much.